What's going on, everybody? And I hope you're enjoying your Hump Day Wednesday so far. This is NYG Jeffy T85 here, and I'm going to talk about today how the New York Giants and their brass have all traveled down to Ohio State, down to Columbus, and they are going to be doing some heavy scouting on Ohio State's ProDay for some key players that we have been heard in mock drafts and in recent speculation that the New York Giants could be connected to in some of these young Ohio State prospects coming into the NFL draft next month. Now, this is an article from BigBlue View, Ed Valentine and Chris Flum, that the New York Giants not only did General Manager Joe Schoen and head coach Brian Daboll fly down to Columbus, Ohio for the Ohio State brass and their pro days, the Giants flew a whole lot of guys down there. Assistant GM Brandon Brown is also there. Offensive coordinator Mike Kafka is there. Quarterbacks coach Shea Tierney is there. And offensive line coach Bobby Johnson is there. And that's a very interesting one right there. Specifically, Bobby Johnson being down there during this pro day scouting makes me believe the Giants are incredibly interested in a bunch of these scouts, a bunch of these players that are down there right now for this Ohio State pro day. Obviously, the headliner is CJ Stroud, but we all know Giants have no interest in him, nor would they even have a shot in hell to draft him, even if they were interested, because in all likelihood, CJ Stroud is going to be drafted as one of the top 2 picks. So the Giants might like what they see in Stroud, but they obviously have no interest in that. Plus, they just paid Daniel Jones 4-year, $160 million contract for him to be their quarterback going into 2023. But it's very notable that the Giants sent this money brass down to Ohio State to scout these young prospects. Now, obviously, when you think about the 2 prospects the Giants have a hell of a lot of interest in at 2 of the weakest positions on this New York Giants team right now, and this is from Andrew Groover at Columbus during the pro day for Ohio State. He says, and what's the common theme right now, the Giants are heavily scouting wide receiver Jaxon Smith-Njigba and center Luke Wypler. Wypler, 21 years old, 300 plus pound center, 6'3". Jaxon Smith-Njigba, 6 foot, 190 pound wide receiver, slot guy mostly. But it's very interesting that the Giants are scouting these 2 players specifically, and they send an entire brass down. Now, this could be, we all know in the NFL draft, A, take it with a grain of salt, and B, this could be a red herring. Sending the entire brass down there to make you believe that the Giants have major interest in these 2 players and a lot of these Ohio State players coming out in the NFL draft. But at the same time, it is not out of the realm and question that the Giants would have significant interest in these 2 players, Smith-Njigba and Wypler. Giants have a major hole at center right now. It's obvious, clear as day. You could even argue right now that center is the biggest hole on this New York Giants football team. And many Giants fans, including myself, have been saying we have got to improve the offensive line. This offseason, we've been saying that for many years. The offensive line, for the most part, has been an absolute dread and a black hole of this football team for many years. We believe we have our left tackle of many years and one of the best young left tackles in football in Andrew Thomas. Evan Neal, who we selected last year out of Alabama at pick number 7, he had a very rough year in his rookie year and showed some tendencies that he's really going to have to work on this offseason if he wants to potentially be the answer at right tackle. But Giants have not had a legitimate center since the days of Sean O'Hara. This team is heavily scouting the young Wypler, the young center Wypler from Ohio State. I know for a fact the Giants have a major interest in this kid. And he could be a guy that, even though he's 21 years old, he's a little bit of a late, he's an early bloomer, but he's a kid that if you develop him enough with Bobby Johnson as the offensive line coach, maybe you can get the most out of this kid going forward. And I find it very interesting with Smith-Njigba that the night before Ohio State's Pro Day, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll were dining with the stud wide receiver out of Ohio State. And we know Ohio State knows how to draft receivers. Hell, one of the very good Ohio State wide receivers is currently on the Giants right now. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Paris Campbell, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, just to name a few. Really good Ohio State wide receivers that have come out. And now you got Smith-Njigba coming out this year, and you got a couple of other guys coming out right behind him in 2023. It is not out of the question that the Giants would have interest in Smith-Njigba, because before this season, his production was tremendous last year in that trio of wide receivers, along with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, who Olave was 4th in Rookie of the Year last year for the New Orleans Saints and had over 1,000 yards receiving for the Saints in his rookie season, and Garrett Wilson, who had over 1,100 yards receiving and was named Offensive Rookie of the Year. We know how good Terry McLaurin is. McLaurin right now is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and you could argue the best wide receiver in the NFC East. And his Buckeyes and current Washington Commanders teammate, Curtis Samuel, when he's healthy, the kid is dynamic and he can play all around the offense. And the Giants just picked up Paris Campbell, who is another dynamic wide receiver. He's just been dealing with injuries, but when he's healthy, he's a very good receiver. Giants could be looking at another Ohio State wide receiver in Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the middle rounds and build with him going forward as a big part of this offense through the next 4 years. We'll have to wait and see. That could be part of their significance. And then Wypler, Giants have been looking for a franchise center for a long time. We have not drafted a franchise center. We have not drafted a center since we drafted Weston Richburg many years ago. That's the last New York Giants center that we drafted, was Weston Richburg, all the way back in 2015. The question is, will the New York Giants be willing to spend a first-round pick on a guy like a Luke Wypler or some of the other centers that are going to be coming out this year? John Michael Schmidt, Jared Patterson. Osiris Torrance can play center, but he's mostly a guard. Steve Avila. There's a bunch of different centers coming out this year. I like Wypler the most, and then you have Ricky Stromberg, who looks like a middle round pick. I like Wypler the most out of all these young centers. I know a lot of people are going to be looking at Schmidt as the top center coming out. He is one of the top centers coming out, but I don't believe that he's the only one. And then the Giants could also potentially have interest in Paris Johnson, the left tackle, who is also getting a lot of looks in the NFL draft. Might not be the top-rated center right now coming in this draft. And Dawand Jones, also the right tackle of Ohio State. They're also getting some interest potentially from the Giants. But at the same time, Andrew Thomas, unless he completely falls off, is looking like the franchise left tackle, and he's going to be getting a major deal from the Giants. And no matter what you think that Evan Neal did last year, he's only going to his second year of his career, and the Giants drafted him at 7. I doubt they're going to give up on him after one season, even after how poorly he looked in his rookie season. But you have to think about that. If some of these guys drop, it doesn't hurt to add some more depth to the offensive line core. But I find it very fascinating that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll sat down for dinner with Jaxon Smith-Njigba the day before his pro day, and the Giants have sent so many scouts and top personnel, front office and coaching staff down to Ohio State specifically to scout players like Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Luke Wypler. Giants definitely have significant interest in this. The question is it legit that these guys are top guys on their board? Or is this a little bit of your classic and typical NFL draft red herring, and they're putting it out there that the Giants have heavy interest in these guys, but they're putting it out there when they really are not anticipating drafting these guys at the positions they're looking at? But like I mentioned, the Giants don't have a center right now. Ben Bredeson and Joshua Zudu. Bredeson, who played left guard most of last year, but also got hurt during the middle of the season with a knee injury. And Joshua Zudu, who dealt with leg injuries and then his season ended with a neck injury. Giants like Zudu a lot, and they're hoping he could develop in their left guard of the future. And Bredeson, he could either be looked at as an interim center, or he could be looking at a guy that could be a depth offensive lineman going into 2023. Giants are looking for a franchise center. They have not had, or they have not drafted a center since Weston Richburg out of Colorado State in 2015. There's a lot of good centers coming out in this NFL draft. This is the year, especially with it being such a need, and we all know you don't draft necessarily for need, but the Giants have a glaring need at center. It's just very interesting to me that they sent so many personnel from the coaching staff and the front office down to Ohio State specifically to scout these players. And Bobby Johnson being there gives me a clear indication they are very interested in these offensive line prospects out of Ohio State. And why wouldn't you, after how good Ohio State's offense has been for the past couple of years? Why would you not be interested in these players? But let me know. You guys let me know in the comment section what you think about the Giants sending Joe Schoen, Brandon Brown, Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka, Shea Tierney, and Bobby Johnson, as well as other scouts down to Ohio State for the the Ohio State ProDay. Thank you. Scouting a bunch of these Ohio State prospects, namely wide receiver Jaxon Smith-Njigba and offensive lineman Luke Wypler, who could potentially be New York Giants after the NFL draft on April 27th to April 29th. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Give a sub to NYGJeffyT85 for more news updates and chatter surrounding the New York Giants. Turn on the bell for notifications of the next video or short dropping on the channel surrounding the New York Giants. And let me know in the comment section what you think about the Giants sending down a hell of a lot of personnel down to Ohio State for their pro day, watching some of these young prospects try out and work out ahead of the NFL draft next month. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. Take it easy and let's go New York Football Giants. Together blue, everyone.